estimated 30 million reef-dwelling organisms are captured each year to supply the aquarium trade, taking a massive toll on wild reef ecosystems.
The aquarium trade has a reduced effect on the overall reef systems compared with other anthropogenic effects such as ocean acidification and temperature rise. Despite this, the effect on populations of specific species are often greatly affected.
Additionally, poor and unsustainable practices lead to damage to coral and overall reef structure. However, large numbers of local people depend on the trade for their livelihood, and when managed sustainably, the effects on wild systems can be mitigated.
Today we aim to outline the impacts of the aquarium trade on the reefs and organisms which reside there, as well as demonstrating the importance of the trade for local communities, then suggesting improvements to make the trade a more sustainable practice.
Over 90% of the marine livestock available for purchase in the aquarium hobby is collected from wild reefs, with 85% of these organisms originating from the coral triangle. However, many unorthodox capture techniques are used, ranging from cyanide fishing to physically hacking away at the reef and coral to access fish or other motile organisms. Cyanide poisoning is now an illegal practice, which began in the 1960s in the Philippines, making it easy for divers to capture fish once they were less active. Despite this, it is still used regularly by many fishermen in approximately 40 countries as part of the aquarium trade. To capture fish can directly affect the reef ecosystem. Researchers estimate that more than 1 million kilograms of cyanide has been pumped onto reefs in the Philippines over the past half-century, and the damage can cause death and recession of coral species, with an estimated square yard of coral being destroyed for every fish caught. Destruction of the three-dimensional reef structure by breaking corals and reef rock to access organisms has hugely damaging effects also. This causes a reduction in hermaphilic sclerotinian coral cover from the removal of often well-established coral colonies, supporting a diverse holobiome. This reduces the quality of the ecosystem services that the corals provide. Moreover, physical removal of three-dimensional structure reduces potential refugia for reef organisms that avoid predation, altering biodiversity and reducing the surface area for which new coral larvae are able to settle. The aquarium trade has very little effect on overall reef fish populations compared to overfishing. However, specific target species for collectors have seen large population declines. The study by Halicher and Tissot demonstrates evidence for the effect of the aquarium species collection on wild populations, showing that 7 of the 10 species that were collected had percentage population reductions ranging from 38 to 75%. Moreover, species such as regal tangs reach a size of around 300 millimetres. Therefore, many of the individuals captured are juveniles. This reduces the number of individuals who make it to adulthood on the reef, and therefore who reach an age where they can reproduce, altering species numbers in the next generation. The study by Schumann et al. Additionally demonstrates that there was also a reduction in species caused by the aquarium trade, specifically with regards to anemone fish, showing that there was a 60% total collection of anemones from sites, accounted for an 80% reduction in anemone fish. This further provides evidence that non-sustainable collection techniques cause cascading effects on reef biodiversity.
With the majority of exports coming from Indonesia and the Philippines, and with a net worth of $330 million, it has been able to support many families, with an estimated 7,000 from the Philippines and 50,000 from Sri Lanka. Within the trade, fish can be sold at $248 per pound, whereas the same fish can be sold to the food trade for only $3 per pound. Likewise, live coral can be sold at $3.50 per pound, but crushed coral for lime is sold at 3 cents per pound. So it's understandable that the local communities would prefer the aquarium trade, as it allows them to achieve a higher standard of living which everyone wants. Unfortunately, some fishermen are let down by dealers and middlemen by selling them for a small fraction of what the dealers make. They also rely on certain species, as most fish will only sell for a few dollars. The peppermint angelfish, on the other hand, would sell for a whopping $30,000. The blue tang fish is very popular from its media spotlight in Finding Nemo, driving the prices up to $100 a fish. The local communities benefit hugely from the trade, but have allowed themselves to be reliant on it. If a ban were to take place, they would have to resort to other ways to support themselves financially, like dynamite fishing, which destroys coral reefs and unwanted species. Furthermore, there is evidence that cyanide fishing has caused cancer shortly after, leading to a premature death. There is no test for cyanide in fish during the transport chain from catch to tank, as it is an expensive process to undergo, so therefore this issue will most likely continue. So the trade is very debatable if it's good or bad. In Indonesia, they banned coral exportation on May the 4th, 2018, and it was soon revoked in October 2018, as collectors, exporters, farmers and shop owners were forced to shut down for the summer, solidifying the fact that a full-on ban wouldn't help anyone. Next up, we have an interview with a manager of an aquarium shop to get information from his side of the trade.
Thank you very much for coming today. So the questions I'm just going to ask you today are just about your livestock, and I just was wondering, are there any ways that you can ensure that the marine livestock you receive has been sustainably caught?
Well, there's no physical evidence we have that it's sustainably caught. The only thing we do have is a guarantee from our providers that all livestock we have has been caught in a sustainable way.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So the second question I want to ask you today is, how many of the marine species do you currently have in stock which have been either bred in captivity or cultured?
Well, the clownfish and the cardinal species, including the bangai, have been bred in captivity, and I can also say that some of the coral species we sell have been either cultured or fragged. However, the majority of it is still from wildlife.
Right. And the final question I want to ask you today is, are there any particular species you're finding it increasingly difficult to acquire?
We haven't seen much change in price globally. However, many species from Hawaii and Indonesia have seen a bit of an increase in price and are becoming harder to acquire.
Brilliant, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another large-scale issue that the aquarium trade poses is the spread of alien invasive species. These are introduced organisms that disrupt the functions of an ecosystem, resulting in the decline of native species. This can be through heavy predation in the trophic structure, outcompeting species for niche production, or the introduction of a disease throughout the community. This has a knock-on effect on the biodiversity, being the second biggest global cause after habitat loss, as many species that make up the community are wiped out by the intruder, whether this is directly or indirectly. Systems that have a high number of endemic species and few large predators such as reefs are more vulnerable to the effects of this. With this in mind, the aquarium trade has massively increased the threat of invasive species, with fish being transported away from their native environment. A prime example of this is the Bolton's lionfish, native to the Indo-Pacific, that is now found in huge numbers across the Caribbean and Central America. When lionfish are no longer needed or wanted by aquarium traders, they find shelter in the warm Gulf Stream, where larvae is distributed outwards. This can create a huge loss for native species who are heavily predated on, as well as creating local economic repercussions, as preyed commercial fish such as snappers and groupers face steep decline in their juvenile stages and never reach market size. Many conservation companies such as the CBD focus heavily on the prevention of alien species by setting guidelines such as the emptying and sterilisation of ships between oceans and spreading public awareness of the associated impacts of fish dumping. To tackle the fast-growing populations, fishermen in Central America have also started taking in large quantities of lionfish to serve as delicacy in coastal restaurants, and removal of early-stage lionfish to prevent reproduction. A population model demonstrated by Morris Jr. et al. Found that in the hard-bottom habitats off the coast of Florida alone, 27% of lionfish populations would have to be removed each month to keep the effects low. However, this requires extensive resources and income to achieve, as the species have shown unprecedented spread for an alien invader.
Finally, to create a more sustainable way for the aquarium trade to work, there are many changes that need to happen. As demand for these rare and popular species rises, many become endangered and must be protected. To do this, a capped number of catches should be set to reduce the damage on the ecosystem. This includes the ban on cyanide fishing to become more strict and to be tested for on a regular basis. However, this will need a lot of funding, which means governments will need to fund, and also companies that are willing to help, such as stakeholder companies. Advancing the knowledge of the local Indonesians to use agriculture for corals could be an extremely advantageous path, as it protects the ecosystem, gives the locals a job with fair pay, and hobbyists are still able to collect their favourite fish. Hobbyists are also stakeholders of the reef system that need to help make the aquaculture trade more sustainable by only buying from trusted companies. Overall, we believe if there could be more funded into the sustainable sourcing of fish and coral in the aquarium trade, it could be beneficial for the locals and their livelihoods, the companies working for them, the biodiversity of the coral reef ecosystems, and the hobbyists purchasing the fish. This would require the aquarium trade to be enforced, organised and managed on a major scale to keep sustainability in order. Some major instant changes that would need to be made include the funding for cyanide checking and coral culturing in a long-term plan to further maintain the health of the trade. There should be more focused research on the ex situ breeding of species, followed by a full ban on the capturing of reef fish for the purpose of aquarium trade. Finally, there should be better education on the general sizes, temperament and all parameters required for looking after coral reef fish. The combination of these could prevent the release of alien species into foreign reef systems.